you wanted the best, you've got the best podcast. The hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
This is Voss here from thechrisvossshow.com. Ladies and gentlemen, there, ladies and that makes it official. Welcome to 16 years, 2,800 episodes of the Chris Voss Show. We bring in the most amazing minds and stories as one of the oldest handful of podcasts still left. We're just dying off here in our old age, folks. All the wonderful podcasts that I started out with back in the day when people were like, what's a podcast? And we're still here and standing. So the only thing we need to do, that's the bell that's telling you need to refer your family, friends, and relatives. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss, YouTube.com/Chris Voss, and all those crazy places they know.
Opinions expressed by guests on the podcast are solely their own and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the host or the Chris Voss Show. Some guests of the show may be advertising on the podcast, but it is not an endorsement or review of any kind.
Today, an amazing young man on the show. We're going to be talking about his book called The Supply and Demand Paradox, a treatise on economics by Byron Fisher. We're going to get into it with him and find out the deets and why this subject is important to him and maybe you. Byron Fisher is a U.S. Army veteran and former captain who served as an infantry officer with the 82nd Airborne Division, completing 2 tours in Iraq. He earned a dual American-British BA in economics from Richmond University, American University in London, before entering military service. While serving in the Army, before his first deployment in Iraq, he wrote The Supply and Demand Paradox, which flips conventional economics on its head by showing that supply and demand are not equal market forces. Supply doesn't generate demand, but demand generates supply. This idea has powerful applications for business strategy, negotiation, leadership, and decision-making under uncertainty. His book also applies the theories to non-traditional economic subjects like theoretical physics and evolutionary biology. And it's already held in the libraries, his book, of Princeton, the London School of Economics, and Cornell. He recently earned his MBA from the Pepperdine Graziadio Business School.
Graziadio, yes.
Graziadio. I clearly didn't go to college. Welcome to the show, Brian. How are you?
Not bad. How are you doing, Chris?
I am doing excellent. It's an honor to have you, sir. Give us your .coms. Where can people find you on the interwebs in the sky?
The supply and demand paradox.com.
So give us a 30,000 overview. What's inside this book, sir?
This book, I wanted to look at economics from a different lens. And I'm thinking about the backbone and foundation of economics that we're always taught is supply and demand. Mm-hmm. We're always taught like they're equal forces. But it turns out that the biggest lie in the history of economics is that supply and demand are equal forces. They are, in fact, not equal forces because supply will not automatically generate demand, but demand will generate supply. If they were equal, you would not see that paradox in relationship. Mm-hmm. But they are not equal.
I would totally agree with you on that premise, too, because, I've built a lot of companies and, I've always sometimes operated from that aspect of, what was the baseball movie? If you build it, they will come.
Field of Dreams. Yes.
Yeah. And that doesn't always happen because sometimes you can build the supply, but if no one wants it or no one knows about it, it's hidden under a rock or you don't buy advertising, there's no demand, right? It's a great thing. What made you get the idea, the aha moment for this? Was there something that triggered that where you were going, I need to write a book about this because something's not right here?
I did economics as an undergraduate, and you hear in class the professors continuously talking about different economists that have come up with all these different ideas. Mm-hmm. And then you're like, maybe I should be doing that. Maybe I should come up with an idea, but I didn't know where to start. So then we go back to that fundamental aspect of supply and demand. And then I take a look at that and say, well, I write it down and think if these words would just jump out at me, I could get something from it. Initially, it did not. But then when I decided to write them in reverse, demand and supply, then it jumped out at me that, okay, the relationship is different depending on which precedes what. If demand's coming first, then you have your supply. If supply is coming first, it's not going to be demand just because the supply is there.
Yeah. And that's so true. I mean, I've been in business since I was 18. I run companies and built lots of things. I've built things and I've been like, okay, we built the supply. Let's see if anybody shows up. And it's true. I mean, one thing I've seen over the years is I've seen this for 20 years now. I think whenever they started making phone apps, I'll see these phone app makers and they will pour all of their money, every dime into building the perfect app. And people do this. So you can use this across a lot of different businesses, and they'll build the perfect app, and then they won't have any money for advertising, so they can't tell anybody. So you can't really get demand if you don't tell anybody about your app. And they just feel that if they just build that perfect supply, quote unquote, that people will be like, "Oh my God, this is the greatest thing ever." And it never happens that way. Number one, you got to tell people about your product to know it exists. But, some people don't like it. I mean, there's, I think if you look at like the war on drugs, if there wasn't demand, there wouldn't be a supply.
And I cover that specifically in my book about illicit markets and drugs, contract killers. Those are issues that I address as well. Also with the book, I parallel other non-traditional things that you previously talked about, like theoretical physics and evolutionary biology. Now, specifically with the paralleling physics, I have the law of demand conservation, which says demand cannot be created or destroyed. It can just change from one form to another.
Oh.
Now, I've had critics of that theory say that, no, that's not true because Apple created demand for the iPhone. It didn't previously exist, and they created demand for that. And my response to that is, no, Apple did not create demand for the iPhone. What they did is they took a product that addressed several previously existing demands and addressed and amalgamated them so that one product can address it. If you look at it, primarily what is an iPhone? It is a communication tool.
Yeah.
Communication tools have been in demand since the beginning of time. It's a navigation tool. I almost can't get anywhere around without doing like Apple Maps or Google Maps on my iPhone. And navigation tools have been around almost forever. And then entertainment. You can listen to music on your iPhone. You can watch TV shows or movies. Demand for entertainment has been there since the beginning of time. So with that saying, Apple did not create demand for the iPhone. They just said, let's make a product that addresses all of these historical demands at once.
Yeah.
And you will see that with other things too. Anytime someone says, oh no, someone created demand for their product, if you look into it deeply enough, they did not create demand for it. They restructured demand that was already out there.
Yeah. The BlackBerry was already out there and it was very popular. Nokia was very popular at the time. I remember that. But with BlackBerry, you had to have this stupid keyboard attached to it and stuff. And, he developed the touchscreen and you're right. I mean, my friend worked on the iPhone in the original team and we had to put a mail service in there. We had to put a web browser in there. We had to put, fax machine, all these different phones. And, you had to pack all this stuff into this thing. And you're right. The demand was there for the having a communications device. All they did was they readjusted it to include all the things to make it the better version, and there's so many examples of that. So I would totally agree with you that you're right. You're on point. I mean, you can't create demand. I mean, what are you going to do? Go around everyone's house and hold a gun to their head and say, buy the iPhone or else? I mean, if people don't like your product or haven't heard about your product or they don't feel that it's, one of the things we did a lot of product reviews over the years in the Chris Voss Show, 18 years on YouTube. And one of the things we always looked at was the correlation between a consumer's ability to easily, to, basically assimilate the product and understand it from a level of just intuitiveness. That's the word I'm looking for. How easy was it, intuitive was it for them to operate it? And that's a big feature probably in what demand wants is intuitiveness, because I've seen products that are really great, but they're so complex. I remember going back to my friend who helped build the iPhone. He went on to build another thing that would have been a WordPress killer, but he didn't want to use it as a WordPress killer. And I told him, I go, dude, you've got to convert this to a WordPress killer. But I remember when he sat down with me on an iPad to show me how his product worked, and it was incredible. It was immensely detailed. But he goes, hang on, I go, just give me the app and I'll play with it. And I'm a reviewer, so I'm pretty good at intuitive stuff. And he goes, no, I'm going to have to spend 45 minutes telling you about it so you don't understand how it works. I'm like, dude, you can't. This isn't scalable. What are you going to do? Knock on every door of every person in demand? And I totally agree with you on that premise. It's interesting to me people push back because, like, how can you force demand? Like, you can't really. I mean, unless you take food away from people and they're like, we demand food. Bread lines.
Going back to the conversation I was having about illegal markets, you can see like organized crime syndicates in the era of prohibition, they would essentially force people to buy their liquor. And if they didn't, people were made examples out of, if you can get what I'm saying there. Mm-hmm. And I addressed that in my book as saying, now you've shifted a demand from a product to a demand for well-being. People are not buying these goods because of a demand for that good, is because it's their demand for their well-being. Because if they don't buy it, harm may come to them or their families.
Yeah. So fear maybe is one way you can create demand, where you go, if you don't eat Tylenol, you'll, I don't know, blow up.
But then again, it goes back to the demand for well-being was already there. You just transferred the demand to that.
People are going to survive. The need for survival. And so it's, if you tell me that I got to take my penicillin so I can get over the flu I currently have right now, I'm going to take my penicillin because I like living. I'm kind of into that.
Definitely.
That's the latest trend I hear, the living thing and not dying. So now you mentioned this scales into, or this works in physics and biology, I think. Tell me how that works, because I flunked. I definitely never got to physics. I couldn't get past algebra 1 without flunking. So tell us about how that plays into those dynamics.
I already addressed the issue about the demand conservation, the law of demand conservation, that demand cannot be created or destroyed, to change forms from one form to another. And in physics, the theory is that energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can just change from one form to another. Whoa. So that's how that parallels physics. With evolutionary biology, I took the example in my book of the lungfish, because I had previously heard various theories about land creatures originating in the sea. Uh-huh. So I decided to look into that deeper. And then in prehistoric world, we had a lungfish, which was a fish that had a swim bladder. And this swim bladder would later be used as a lung. What happened was, in the prehistoric world, the bodies of water that these lungfish were in began to dry up. And it was just a series of puddles.
Wow. So it's survival of the fittest.
Fish would be in one puddle and their food may be in another puddle. Oh. So how do you get from that one puddle to another? You're a fish, you have fins, you only know how to swim. So they started to learn how to walk. But they were demanding feet that they did not have. They had fins. When they demanded the feet that they did not have, evolution came to play, and they began to become supplied by nature with the feet that they needed to get from one place to another without swimming.
And hence our species evolved. We walked up out of the primordial soup and said, "Where's the nearest McDonald's?" Maybe that's what that lungfish was after, eh? A good In-N-Out burger.
Yes. And now maybe they don't have to leave their puddle. They can just get a delivery app to bring it to them.
Yeah. Those lungfish are big on Uber Eats. I'm always competing with them for my order. Damn it. The lungfish always gets delivery faster than me. But no, I mean, so that's interesting. Demand for food, demand for survival. And I imagine you're right. I mean, I'm no physicists or scientists or biologists by any measure. I think I flunked biology too. I hated that I don't think I could do the frog when I had to carve the frog open. I'm really a boob when it comes to blood and guts and stuff. So I think I flunked because I wouldn't do the frog. But D-, I don't remember. I got a lot of D-, folks. But it wasn't because I was trying. So that's probably, you can read my book and I'll explain what that's about. Yeah, the lungfish, that's really interesting. But yeah, I mean, it's amazing how our species probably evolved based on our demand and wanting supply, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And I guess we do that probably in a lot of ways now where we the bell tolls for thee here. This is our Hemingway moment right now. Look up at this guy before you die. What are some other applications or arguments that people will usually give you that you give them examples of your theory?
There's also an issue that I deal with in the book based off of irrational goods. Because I've heard the story about, no, you can't demand something and just get supplied, because people have been demanding the founding youth for centuries and no one's ever supplied it. But then you say that, okay, yes, people actually have supplied the founding youth and artificial founding youth. You have your plastic surgeries, you have your Botox, you have various health fitness spas, rejuvenation techniques, various things that are to restore that youthful vigor to you. So the fountain of youth that Ponce de Leon was looking for, that in that particular form may not have been supplied, but the market has reacted by creating artificial versions of that supply, of that fountain of youth.
Yeah. I mean, I have huge dating groups, and a lot of women, they believe that what the makeup companies tell them, that they're going to be beautiful forever. And I mean, honestly, I've seen, if you've ever seen those makeup artists that on YouTube where they can make themselves look like a whole different person with makeup, it's pretty amazing. I remember I've had some gals say to me, those trans guys are really good at makeup. They're better than us. They look better than us. What the hell? And I'm like, yeah, well, I mean, you compete with them. Yeah, and this really makes sense. Let me ask you this. We talk a lot about entrepreneurs in the show. I'm an entrepreneur, you're an entrepreneur, and a lot of us and entrepreneurs, we kind of identify the needs of demand, because the normal path of most entrepreneurs is they experience something. So they experience maybe a service or a product. And I like to use the simple version of a paperclip. And I remember when I was growing up, I would look at paper clips and I'd be like, okay, that product's pretty much done on innovation. That's a pretty smart product, that paper clip. I don't think you can improve on that much. But an entrepreneur will experience stuff and go, you've done that with the idea concept of supply and demand. You've made a product and a service over it that you can consult or speak on. So basically what an entrepreneur does is they'll identify demand because they are the demand, right? They're using the product and they see the demand and how popular it is. And usually, if it's popular enough, it's profitable. So obviously they're using the product and it's still in business, but they can look at it and be like, there's some problems with this product where it's not perfect. And I've got some ideas on how you can make it better. And then they'll basically take that same thing that you're talking about where they'll alter the supply, but they know there's a demand there. And they think that their premise or their theory is if I can make this better, I can create more demand. Just, we were talking about with the iPhone. And so that's pretty much the engagement of what a lot of entrepreneurs are doing. And if you really think about it, innovating a product that's already in demand is probably better than trying to create a new product from whole cloth that maybe there's no demand for. What would you think about that? I'm
thinking about tapping into the zeitgeist. Like ESG and green thinking is very popular now. And if you go back to your example of the paperclip, the way an entrepreneur may approach that is, okay, where's this material coming from? Is it coming from a certain region or world that my particular country is at odds with? Is child labor being used to produce this? Is it being done in a manner that maximizes carbon output as opposed to reducing it? So you can say, okay, I have this paper clip here that's made out of this more sustainable material, or this paper clip that's coming from country A that is an ally as opposed to country B that is not. So there's various different ideologies within the scope of contemporary world that you could tap into to take another angle at a product.
And yeah, I mean, this is a use case for so many different things, and identifying them. You're going to make me think of, you've changed my paradigm and how I think about starting businesses and how I analyze stuff, because yeah, you can't force demand. And that's really important. I mean, like I said, I've started a lot of companies. I start a lot of Facebook groups. I start a lot of social media projects. And basically what I do is I start them, and they're kind of launched from the idea that if you build it, maybe they'll come, but you never know. And a lot of those companies, you know, did never scale. They never hit fruition. They never found demand. And so I just went, okay, there's either not demand for this product or not enough people know about my product. I can't scale my advertising to let people know. And yeah, you can't go around and hold a gun to people's head and buy my product or else. I think some people try to do that. There might be some examples people can think of right now, but yeah, I love the premise. You know, maybe you're I was listening about Einstein recently, and now, you know, I can't remember, somebody called him stupid in school or something. They said he was slow a learner, but he was coming up with these very simple concepts that weren't simple in any way, but the simplicity of them, you know, E equals MC squared, right? I mean, how simple is that? But to what it defined. And I think you've kind of hit on one of those things. Maybe you're the new Einstein, Byron.
Hopefully.
We need to get you some grants and stuff. But no, I mean, this can be applied in a lot of things. Maybe you can apply it to interpersonal communications or leadership, how CEOs operate in the thing, you know. And one of the things, you know, I've had people that have created companies where I remember I had one guy who came into my office, and I had built my mortgage company with $4,000. That was how much it cost. And it was a multi-millionaire company and profitable also a multi-millionaire company by the end of the year, but it was profitable within 3 months. And it was a multi-millionaire company and built over 20 years. And I remember he came into my office and he was like an out of work entrepreneur. And he goes, you know, Chris, I don't know what you do here and how you do it, but you know, I just spent $200,000 of my own money to build my own mortgage company, and it failed. And and that was an example of him building supply. Wait, do I have this right? And not finding demand. And part of it was he spent all the money on a class AAA building. You know, he literally got an office in the most expensive per square foot building in the city. And then he spent like all this money on opulent furniture and all this sort of stuff. And the business failed because he couldn't find demand for what he wanted and the prices that he was going to have to do. And I imagine, does price fall into this where, you know, if I price a product, you know, say you and I are selling the same product, but I charge $10 and you charge $5. Does this equation map into there maybe somewhere?
Yes and no, because you have to look into other things. Brand name and brand recognition has a lot to do with that, what people are willing to pay for. As you can see with various products, I give the example of the Birkin bag versus a Coach bag. Birkin bag can increase the price tenfold, and you'll still find people even more willing to pay for it because it's a status symbol saying, look how much I paid for this, versus another bag, once it's outside of the realm of affordability, then you start to see people push away from the table.
Yeah.
So that's an example of brand recognition. And just with the aspects of inelasticities of demand, you have oil and gas, where most people, most consumers, most businesses cannot lay off of that, regardless of how high the price goes.
You got to go someplace when you got to go.
So it depends on diversity of things available, as well as brand recognition, status symbol. I could go on and on with different reasons why someone would pay a different price for a seemingly homogeneous good. Mm-hmm. But there's different factors that go into it. But the fundamental thing that I'm driving home with my theory is just supply and demand, where the demand will lead for the supply and then the prices will work themselves out afterwards. But once the supply has been brought to the market to meet the demand.
Sometimes you need time to build demand. Because do you think time is a factor on that? Because sometimes it can take a while for a company to get recognized and hit scale and finally scale. Like sometimes, I've had companies where we're trying to get the thing rolling. We've been rolling it for a while. And then there's somehow this light goes on. It's like an aha moment. And the orders flood in and you're like, whatever we did, we finally dialed it. Does timing play into any of the points of supply and demand?
Going back to the thing about building demand, I would characterize it as identifying demand, which is equally time consuming. You have to identify the demand that is already out there and how you can address it with what you're providing. And that can be time consuming. It doesn't have to be, but it can be. And then there's trial and error. You might get to the point where you think you've identified what you're going after and you find out, actually, no, I need to address this additional demand, or maybe I need to abandon this demand in favor of a better one. You're digging through it and you find something that you may not have been inspecting, and you decide that an example of that would be Ozempic.
Oh.
It was designed as a diabetes drug, but I don't think Novo Nordisk is very profitable today based off of it just being a diabetes drug. There's obviously that demand that they weren't initially aiming for that resulted in them being extremely profitable. It's something that they, as far as I can ascertain, weren't seeking in the first place. The same thing with Viagra. It was designed as a blood pressure medication, but then it became profitable because the male test subjects had side effects, and they decided, hey, this is more profitable going through this other door. And in both cases, those are demands that these companies, Pfizer, Novo Nordisk, were not seeking initially, but they decided to jump ship to something else. And that's another factor with the time. Now that they found out that it's more profitable through a different door, that could take more time to repackage it as that, as opposed to what they were initially doing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and this is something entrepreneurs should look at, and really say. I've had people, they've come on the show with their apps or their products or their services. And sometimes I've kind of sat there and scratched my head like, did you consider there might be not demand for, sometimes they're the narrow target of what they've targeted. I only want to sell to people who were born on Saturday, the 5th, and they live in America and whatever. And you're like, is that going to be profitable for that small amount of demand, assuming you can capture it and entice it? And I think this is an important factor for entrepreneurs to look at, and CEOs, Is there really demand for what we're trying to do here? There's probably plenty of examples we can think of. Maybe the Kodak one's a good one. The famous story of Kodak is they controlled the market. They dominated the market in photographs and pictures. And they developed, someone in their company developed digital photography. And when they went to him with it and said, hey, this is probably the future. This is where the future demand is going to be. They went, no, demand is right here. With photos, and, you're driving down to the photomat and driving back to get your photos picked up and crap. Why would someone want to sit home and just put their photos on their computer? Why would that be possible? Because those Polaroids were such good digital photos, or real photos. But, so they ignored that potential for that demand that would come. And because of it, they ended up in bankruptcy, and someone else beat them to the punch. Maybe that's a good example.
Staying on the same track of thinking, I would look at Netflix versus Blockbuster. Blockbuster was thinking, okay, people line up to come here on a Friday evening to get their tapes for the weekend, and then we'll remind them to be kind and rewind, and they bring it back that Sunday evening, Monday morning. And there's this new service that's just mailing out DVDs, and then the people can just return them whenever. And Blockbuster initially shunned that. And then by the time they just realized that this was where the demand was going, it was too late.
Yeah, and they had an offer to purchase Netflix too.
Correct.
Netflix ran to him and said, "Hey, do you want to buy this? Could you smell?" But yeah, I mean, so many examples of this, and learning about this. What are some other things that we should know about your book that maybe we haven't talked about?
Let's see. With my book, there's one situation I thought was very interesting that I learned about as an economics undergraduate, and that's coffee houses to stock exchanges. In London, the stock market started in coffee houses. Traders met in coffee houses, discussed business, and they ended up trading securities over coffee in coffee houses in London.
Really?
And then we say that in respect to my theory, they were initially being supplied this coffee house, and they were demanding the coffee, but it turned out that they ended up being supplied a stock exchange.
Oh.
So now they're being supplied something that they're really no longer demanding, because their primary purpose for being there isn't to drink coffee, it's to trade stocks, which then transformed into a demand for a stock exchange. Then out of that, we have the London Stock Exchange.
Yeah. So all these guys were getting together and networking over coffee, and they're like, "Hey, man, you want to buy some stock?" And somebody's like, "Yeah, maybe we should do that." And yeah, I mean, there's a lot of business deals done over coffee and beer to this day, right? Yeah.
Correct.
Go to the bar, I used to take clients to lunch all the time to hustle for business, or, enhance a business relationship, or, just make sure you had a continuum. And I've been, wine and dine. I remember one time it's interesting to me. The story that I started to tell about the guy who spent $200,000 to build his own mortgage company, and he burned through the money so fast within, I think it was 18 months or 8 months, he was out of business. I think it was 8 months. He didn't even make it past a year. And, part of it was he didn't give time for the demand out there to meet or become aware of his product. And he provided this high-end supply. And of course, he had to charge a lot of money for it too, because his undercutting was so expensive. But he couldn't do what Birkenstock did, like you said. He couldn't demand high prices than other people could. And I remember telling him, I go, look at my office here. I'm sitting in some kind of shitty office. I've got a Class C building, probably Class D building. It was an old ass building, Class D. We paid hardly anything in rent, but we passed that through in savings to our consumers, and so we didn't have to charge a lot of money because we didn't have a Class A building. And so he priced himself basically out of demand, where we priced ourselves in a range that would maximize demand for customers who want a mortgage, but wouldn't price them out of the market. So we would, find that sweet spot. So maybe there's a lesson there in the same aspects of what you're doing in supply and demand. Are you going to go out and speak on this book? You're going to tour about, maybe, try and spread the word, or do podcasts, I guess?
Yeah, continue to do podcasts. Like I said, my website is the supplyanddemandparadox.com, and I continue to develop that website. And as I continue to make progress with my work.
This might be some good topics for a TED Talk. I'm sure you've thought of that.
Yes, definitely. TED Talks, I've definitely watched more than my fair share of those during my MBA program.
Yeah.
So this will definitely be a good topic.
Because people, even me, we've always kicked around the supply and demand thing. Supply and demand. But we don't really think about it. And like I say, I've seen so many examples of building supply that has no demand, or can't find demand, or it's going to take a long time to scale in demand. There's my one friend has this saying that he picked off of someone else called "the pioneer always gets the arrows." So in many times, the first to market isn't always the most successful person, especially in an innovation. So they may come to market, and there's just not demand there because people don't understand the value of the product, or they haven't scaled the advertising and awareness of it. Or sometimes, like I remember when Google Glasses came out, and boy, it was really cool. In fact, I don't think there's been a product made of it since. The new Meta glasses might be close, but I don't have the ones with the screen on them. I've got the cheaper ones that just talk to you. But I remember when Google Glass came out, very few people had it. And people were really offended by it. They felt it was a violation of their privacy. I'd have people walk up to me and start yelling at me that I was recording them. And I'd be like, you're in a restaurant. There's cameras everywhere. Like I don't think you realize you're always being recorded. Even your phone is recording what you're up to. And so I just have a camera on my head. And I would even tell them, I'd be like, it only can record video for 10 minutes before the battery dies. The batteries weren't that great back then. And so you need to turn it off. I'm like, believe me, it's off. The battery is dead. I've already run it. And it just is violent opposition to it. And it finally died off probably because of that. And then now 10, 15 years later, how long has it been? We have the Meta glasses and I wear them everywhere. No one ever bothers me about them. You can record and photograph and people have bought them in mass. This is kind of interesting how sometimes there's, people just don't see the demand. And sometimes it's a cultural thing where people have to finally get it, maybe. I don't know.
Well, back to what you were saying broadly, you brought up Meta and Google. If we just go back to just the foundation of those two companies, Google was not the first search engine. Facebook, as it was known initially as the whole operation, was not the first social network. But Google dominates search engines today, and Facebook and Meta dominate social networking. So then you say, then what's the difference between them? Like, how's it that Facebook made it this big, but MySpace died off? And then someone like Ask Jeeves in the search engine race was eclipsed by Google. And the demand was there for the functionality of these products. That's where you go with the timing. It's not necessarily how long it took to get it there. It has to be, did you hit the demand right at that moment?
Yeah.
I think of the metaphor of, you see the bear standing over the river. You have to reach just at the right moment to scoop that fish right out. You have to be at the right moment, otherwise they're not going to get the fish. So the fish are there, but it's the timing of when the bear gets that fish out of the river. So the same thing with this, the demand for social networks and the demand for search engines was there, but which one of these companies was the bear that had the timing to scoop it out right at the right moment?
Yeah. And timing is everything sometimes. I mean, we often say that luck is more important than
the
skill. Yeah. And timing is everything. I remember, I think it was Lycos that was the big search engine before Google. I think it was Lycos or Yahoo maybe. And like we've talked about on the show, they built just a better widget. They built a better machine and people went, hey, this is way better over here. And then demand moved. And is there any, I guess we've pretty much identified this correlation between innovation and demand, but is there always a direct correlation? Because I think sometimes you can innovate something and people go, I don't understand this product anymore, maybe.
It's going back to, I always believe that the demand is never created. You can find the fundamental aspect of it somewhere throughout human history. And if you look back far enough, anything that appears to be new is addressing something, is addressing a need that was there or a demand that was there already, just in a new, innovative way, more creative way, more convenient way.
As we go out, give people your final pitch out on why they should buy the book, how they can learn out more about you and develop more.
My book, The Supply and Demand Paradox, is the most groundbreaking addition to the field of economics in the past century. You're not going to find another book that addresses fundamental market concerns the way that mine does and gets you to think in innovative ways in which you thought economics didn't apply to at all. Economics applies to everything. Most people just think about money and markets, but I can show you in my book that it applies to things that you never thought it would apply to. It's thought-provoking. It will force you to think in different ways and see your world in a way that you previously didn't know was possible. you will get that from my book.
You've changed my paradigm. I'm going to be thinking about this more when I think about starting companies or launching widgets or products. It definitely is, analyzing what's the demand. Because like I say, one of the things I used to do is we used to loan money from our companies to start other companies that were having trouble, entrepreneurs that were in trouble that needed loans. Was basically, do you need a loan? Your business in trouble? Talk to us. And so I got to analyze tons of businesses, good, bad, and ugly, and many of the reason they needed loans is because they were strapped. So they would send me, their P&Ls and all that stuff that you normally would never, if you ever ask any company for their P&Ls and their data, you'd be like, hell no. But, since these people need a loan, they would just cough it right up. And then I would get to go tour their companies. And yeah, I saw a lot of that. People would create, some sort of really isolated, thinly available widget for demand. And you'd be like, there's maybe 10 people who need this product or service. Yeah, I think you've kind of supplied yourself out of the market by limiting your availability or scale of wide-ranging supply. So this gives me a lot to think about, man. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming on the show. And then we got your .coms, right? As we went out there.
The supply and demand paradox.com.
Thank you very much for coming on the show. Thanks, Ernest, for tuning in. Order up his book wherever fine books are sold. It's called The Supply and Demand Paradox, a treatise on economics. And I really think you should go out and train CEOs and entrepreneurs on this, do some speaking gigs and stuff, because this is a really big deal. I mean, this you've changed my paradigm on supply and demand. And I never really thought about it that much. I just kind of went, well, supply and demand, if you build it, they'll come, maybe. Found that out the hard way. They don't always come. So yeah, you can build supply, but if demand is like, yeah, I don't think so. You're screwed, especially if you spend a lot of money doing it. Thank you very much, Byron. Thanks, Monis, for tuning in. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss, Chris Voss 1 on the TikTok, and all those other crazy places on the internet. Be good to each other. Stay safe. We'll see you next.
You've been listening to the most amazing, intelligent podcast ever made to improve your brain and your life. Warning, consuming too much of the Chris Voss Show podcast can lead to people thinking you're smarter, younger, and irresistible sexy. Consume in regularly moderated amounts. Consult a doctor for any resulting brain bleed.
All right, Byron, thank you very much. I certainly